Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a plunge into a really powerful and resonant work of historical fiction. It's Kristin Hannah's 2024 novel, The Women. This one's been generating a lot of conversation, and, well, for good reason. So, our mission today, we want to unpack the core insights from what reviewers are calling a, powerful, emotional, and haunting work of historical fiction. We're going to try and illuminate the often overlooked experiences of American women who served in the Vietnam War and explore why their stories are just so crucial. Hannah, who's a real master storyteller, Adela, she's delivered what many feel is one of her most politically resonant and character-driven novels yet. With The Women, hopefully, by the end of this deep dive, you'll really understand why this book feels both necessary and, frankly, unforgettable. Let's get right into it. Okay, so at the heart of The Women, we have our protagonist, Frankie McGrath. She's a young woman from Coronado Island, California, and she embarks on this incredibly compelling journey right into the chaos of war. What really drives her, well, it seems like a mix. Raw patriotism, definitely.
But also this deep desire to prove herself, especially after her brother gets deployed. It's not just some casual decision for Frankie. It feels like a really profound personal commitment. It pushes her towards something, well, unimaginable, really. But that initial idealism, that sense of purpose, it seems to shatter almost immediately. As soon as she enlists as a nurse, Frankie's just thrust into the chaos, the bloodshed, the trauma of war. It's an immediate, really jarring confrontation with the visceral realities of combat. It leaves very little room for any romantic notions of service she might have had.
Yeah, what's truly striking about Hannah's introduction to Frankie's journey is exactly that stark contrast. You absolutely see that youthful idealism, that sort of patriotic fervor to serve, which, was a common thread for so many young people enlisting in that era. But then, almost without taking a breath, she's plunged into the brutal day-to-day reality of an MAS use unit in Vietnam. This super rapid transition from a, let's say, somewhat idealized view of military service to the horrific, constant trauma of caring for gravely wounded soldiers, it really emphasizes the immense psychological and emotional shock and just the sheer courage required simply to survive in that environment. It's a real baptism by fire, and Hannah, she definitely doesn't hold back in depicting how intense it is.
Wow, it sounds incredibly intense. But, like you said, amid all that darkness, a really powerful and vital theme emerges. This idea of a sisterhood in suffering. Frankie forms these incredibly deep bonds with other female nurses, specifically Ethel and Barb. And it's pretty clear that their mutual support, their shared grief, and this fierce loyalty, that's what truly anchors the story. And, in many ways, it's what keeps these women sane amidst the bombs, the gunfire, the heartbreak they witness every single day. It's fascinating how these connections basically become their lifeline.
That's precisely it. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this theme of sisterhood and suffering is absolutely crucial to understanding the forgotten voices of women in war. Hannah's portrayal of their experiences, well, it's raw, it's brutal, and undeniably eye-opening. For far too long, history has had this tendency, right, to erase women from narratives of conflict, to sideline their contributions, or just simply not acknowledge their presence on the front lines. This book explicitly combats that erasure. And what's particularly poignant, I think, is how the psychological wounds of these women, their PTSD, their trauma, were often dismissed or minimized when they returned. It was sort of like their service wasn't real enough or impactful enough to cause such deep and lasting damage. And this is really where Hannah's strength as a writer truly shines. She is renowned for crafting these emotional, resonant female friendships, right? And in The Women, these relationships become the very backbone of resilience. They illustrate how these women supported each other through immense, unimaginable trauma which was often compounded by the lack of recognition or understanding they faced from the outside world. They found solace and strength in each other when society really offered very little. It's a testament, I think, to the profound and enduring power of human connection in the most extreme and isolating circumstances.
That brings us to what sounds like an equally devastating part of the story, the battle these women faced after the war. Frankie's struggle when she gets back home is described as profound. The world she re-enters is painted as hostile, dismissive, even disbelieving of women veterans. It's just heartbreaking to think that after everything they endured, after risking their lives, they weren't welcomed home as heroes. Instead, they were met with silence and skepticism. And the part that really struck me, what feels incredibly tragic, is that detail about her own parents. They actually urged her to forget the war. Their devastating claim being, there are no women in Vietnam. Just imagine being told your profound, traumatic, life-altering experience simply didn't happen or, didn't matter. How does Hannah convey that sense of invalidation, that dismissal?
Well, that parental dismissal, there are no women in Vietnam. It just perfectly encapsulates the societal denial of female service during that era. It wasn't just a personal slight for Frankie, it was a reflection of a much wider cultural blind spot. Frankie's post-war journey in Hannah's telling is just as devastating, maybe even more so, than her time in combat. She battles not only the very real symptoms of PTSD, but also addiction and this profound loneliness of not being believed, of having her truth denied. Her alienation, even from her own family. It sadly mirrors the experiences of many real-life Vietnam veterans, both men and women, who returned home to a deeply divided and, let's be honest, often unsupportive society. And Hannah, she unflinchingly shows these ugly truths. She details the inadequate mental health support these veterans received, the pervasive stigma they faced for showing any signs of trauma, and the crushing silence that surrounded their experiences. It's a stark reminder of how societal misunderstanding and sometimes outright neglect can deepen the wounds of war long after the fighting has stopped. The book forces you, the reader, to confront the immense personal cost of service when that service is denied or ignored by the very society you fought for. It's a powerful exploration of how invisible wounds can be just as debilitating as visible ones, especially, when they are met with disbelief.
Yeah, absolutely. Given all this, I'm curious about the broader historical context. How meticulous was Hannah's research for this period? Was she really able to capture the time? Not just for Frankie, but the whole atmosphere of the era itself.
Oh, absolutely. The novel demonstrates strong social criticism, and it's woven throughout a meticulously researched historical tapestry. Hannah vividly renders the historical backdrop, really immersing the reader in the period. This isn't just about Frankie's personal story, right? It's interwoven with the larger events and sentiments of the time. Things like the escalating anti-war protest movements back home, which, added another layer of confusion and hostility for returning soldiers, and the casual misogyny prevalent in society then, and of course, the harrowing, incredibly detailed scenes within the MASH hospital in Vietnam itself. You can almost feel the heat, smell the medical alcohol, hear the sounds of incoming casualties. It's that visceral. And this deep historical accuracy allows the novel to powerfully critique the glamorized, often sanitized image of war that we sometimes see. By showcasing the gritty, unvarnished reality of medical service and its profound toll, Hannah really challenges the historical erasure of women's contributions. She forces us to reconsider whose stories are deemed worthy of being told, remembered, and honored. It's a deliberate and, I think, powerful act of reclaiming a narrative that was suppressed for so long, making visible what was, for decades, essentially invisible.
That's fascinating how she blends the personal narrative with such a sharp historical critique. Okay, so speaking of how she tells the story, let's dig into Kristin Hannah's writing style a bit. The novel's prose is often described as, lyrical yet accessible, balancing sweeping historical storytelling with intimate emotional depth. What stands out to you about her approach? How does she manage to make the dialogue feel authentic and the pacing grip the reader so emotionally? Especially as Frankie descends into that heartbreak of being a forgotten hero.
Well, Hannah's style is undeniably a hallmark of her work, isn't it? And it's what makes the women so impactful. It's that masterful blend of accessible language with a profound emotional register that just draws you in immediately. She has this incredible talent for bringing you deep into the characters' inner lives. You really feel their pain, their joy, their terror, while simultaneously painting this broad, compelling historical canvas. The authenticity of the dialogue, like you said, is key. These aren't just characters. They feel like real people speaking, grappling with impossible circumstances. This allows you to truly connect with Frankie's journey, particularly as her post-war trauma deepens and she struggles to find her footing in a world that largely denies her reality. And the pacing, especially in the second half, it kind of mirrors Frankie's own fragmented experience, creating this sense of urgency and emotional descent that keeps you utterly gripped.
Yeah. Now, just a quick note on common points of criticism you might hear, because, every book, even a powerful one, can have elements that might divide readers a little. Some might find a potential for sentimentality in Hannah's writing.
However, it's worth considering that this sentimentality often mirrors the very real, raw pain of veterans and their families. It might be reflecting the intensity of their experiences rather than just being, melodramatic for effect. Another point sometimes raised is that some plot turns might feel a bit predictable, perhaps, to seasoned readers of historical fiction. And while these elements may exist, it's important to stress, I think, that they rarely detract from the book's overall power. They're sort of minor observations in what is otherwise an incredibly impactful and necessary narrative that resonates really deeply.
Okay, so wrapping things up, what does this all mean for us? This deep dive into the women has definitely highlighted some crucial takeaways. We've seen how this novel shines a really essential spotlight on the long-forgotten experiences of female Vietnam veterans, illuminating their courage and sacrifice. We've also explored those unbreakable bonds of sisterhood forged in just unimaginable adversity. and the profound, often hidden challenges of post-war reintegration that these women faced. It's a lot to take in.
It really is. And this raises an important question, I think, for all of us about the narratives we choose to remember, the ones we celebrate, and perhaps more importantly, the ones we inadvertently or even deliberately erase. The Women truly forces readers to confront the painful truths of history and, crucially, to celebrate the incredible resilience of women who were long forgotten by society. It's a powerful call, really, to re-examine our historical understanding and to ensure that all voices from the past are finally heard and acknowledged.
Absolutely. So if you're looking for your next read, The Women comes highly recommended, especially for readers of historical fiction and particularly those interested in women's roles in wartime. If you're a fan of Hannah's other deeply moving works like The Nightingale or The Great Alone, you'll almost certainly want to pick this up. And yeah, it sounds like an incredibly powerful and thought-provoking discussion topic for any book club out there. Definitely something to talk about. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Kristin Hannah's The Women. We hope it's given you plenty to think about and maybe a new lens through which to view a critical piece of our history. Until next time, keep exploring.